Sagt the Mishnah, Ha-Pesach sheshachtai shaloi l'shmai. A carbon Pesach that was shechted not for the sake of carbon Pesach. For example, Rashi says, instead of thinking that he's shechting it for the carbon Pesach, he's thinking that he's going to shecht it for a carbon shlomim. The kibbel, v'holach, v'zarak shaloi l'shmai. Or the Kabbalah receiving the blood, or carrying the blood to the Mizbeach, or sprinkling the blood on the Mizbeach, any of these that were done not for the sake of carbon Pesach. So that's how the Gemara explains this. It doesn't mean that it was all done Shaloi Lishma, either or. Any of these four avodas that were done Shaloi Lishma. Then the Mishnah says, Lishmai v'Shaloi Lishmai, in a case where he had actually two things in mind. He was thinking, I'm bringing it for the sake of the carbon Pesach, but then he was also thinking afterwards that it's not for the sake of carbon Pesach. Or in the reverse, Oy shaloi lishmai ulishmai. In the beginning he was thinking that it's not for the carbon Pesach, and then afterwards he thinks the right kavanah that it is for the carbon Pesach, pasul. In both of these cases it's going to be pasul. The Gemara will explain, most of the Gemara here we're learning today, will explain exactly this case. What does it mean that he had these two kavanahs? Exactly when did he have these two kavanahs? The Mishnah spells this out. Keitzad l'shmai v'shaloi l'shmai. What does it mean that he's thinking for the sake of the carbon Pesach and not l'shem Pesach? He had a kavanah that he's bringing it for the sake of the Pesach, or l'shem shlamim, and also for the shlamim. Shaloi l'shmai or l'shmai is the opposite. L'shem shlamim. First he's thinking it's for the sake of a shlamim, and then l'shem Pesach. Then he thinks it's for the Pesach. So these are all the cases where it's going to be pasul. One of the things that's unique about the Shaloi Lishma by a carbon Pesach, different than other karbanis, is, this is in the beginning of the Gemara's Vachim, all karbanis, if you don't have the right kavanah, Lishma, so the owner that brings the carbon wasn't yaitza his mitzvah, but the actual carbon is kosher. It can be brought in the Mizbeach. There are two karbanis that are an exception to that, Pesach and Chatos. There's a limit from it. Rashi here brings the limit regarding Pesach, that you have to bring it, right? The lashon of the pasuk is Zevach Pesachu. So it has to be brought with the intention for the Pesach. And if not, it's totally pasul. That's the chiddush about the Pesach of Shaloi Lishma. Pesach and Chatos has a similar halacha. Boy, Rav Papa asked the question regarding the case of the Mishnah where it said that he had two kavanas. He had a kavanah Lishmai and Shaloi Lishmai. And it says it's pasul. So why and in what case is it pasul? Ba'avayda achas tanan is the Mishnah talking about in one avayda, in the same avayda he had two kavanas, or b'shtei avaydas tanan. Is the Mishnah talking about that there was two different avaydas here? In one avayda he had a kavana lishma, and in another avayda he had a kavana shaloi lishma, and then it would be pasul. And the Gemara explains the basis for this question. And what is that? Zok the Gemara, ba'avayda achas tanan, is it all in one avayda? V'Rab Yosi. And this follows the opinion of Rabbi Yosi. So as Rashi here brings in the last Rashi on the Yamud, there's a machlokes between Rabbi Yosi and Rab Meir. We had this before over here not long ago, regarding a person that uses two kavanas, or two different expressions actually, in something that he says. The place that Rashi brings it from, the source, in the Gemara and Tumura, is when a person is making another animal into a Tumura. You're bringing the Kedusha of Kachim from one animal onto another, and he uses two expressions. He says, this is going to be a Tumuras Oila and a Tumuras Shlamim. So now the question is, what part of his sentence do we look at? So as Rashi here brings, you look in the last Rashi, so Rab Meir says, you look at the beginning of his words. Tfais Lashon Rishon. You always have to look at how he started off his sentence. The way a person begins, that's what he really meant. What he said afterwards is irrelevant. So therefore, in that case, it's going to be an Oila. Rabbi Yosi says, no, you have to look at the entire sentence that he said. If he says that this animal should be a Oila and a Shlamim, so what do? We take this animal, well, we have to wait until it has a mum, and then we can sell the animal, and then half of the money will go towards an Oila, and half of it will go towards a Shlamim. So Rabbi Yosi's opinion is, as we'll see in the Gemara soon, it brings the lashon that af b'gemar dvarav adam nitvas, that you have to look at everything he says, the beginning of a sentence and the end of a sentence. So now the question is, how do we apply that over here to our case when the person had two kavanas? He had a kavanah shaloi lishma, or actually first he had a kavanah lishma, and then he had a kavanah shaloi lishma. So what are we talking about? So again, back into the lashon of the Gemara. Ba'avayda achas tanan, Is the Mishnah speaking over here all in the same Aveda? Rabbi Yosi, and it follows the opinion of Rabbi Yosi. The Omar, Rabbi Yosi said, Af b'gemar dvarav adam nitvas. A person's words follows even what he said second. So over here, even though he first had a kavanah l'shma, but because in the same Aveda he also has an kavanah shaloi l'shma, so therefore it's not going to be good. The Rab Meir, now if this would be Rab Meir, ha'amar tfais lashon rishon. According to Rab Meir, there's no issue. Rab Meir says just follow the first kavanah. In the beginning he thought l'shma, so it's fine. So if it's in the same Aveda and you're telling me that it's possible, this has to be according to Rab Yosi, not Rab Meir.
What did he say?
Huh?
What did he say?
At nicht gesagt, he's thinking. So the Gemara is applying the same concept to when a person's thinking. If he thinks two kavanas, so Rab Meir says you go according to the first kavana, but Rab Yosi says no, because he said also shaloi l'shma, it's going to be possible. Or maybe we should say b'shtei avedas tnan. In the Mishnah when it says l'shma and shaloi l'shma, it's two different avedas. One aveda, let's say shchita, he thought l'shma, but then when it came to Kabbalah, receiving the blood, he thought the kavanah of shaloi l'shma. So it's a completely different aveda. And then vafilul Rab Meir, the Amar tfais lashon rishon, even Rab Meir that says that you follow the first lashon that a person says, hanemili ba'aveda achas. That's all in the same aveda. So if you say or think two things in the same aveda, you follow the first kavanah. Aval b'shtei avedas made the mifsal. In two avedas, he would be made that it would be possible, because it's a different aveda. Each aveda for itself, if you have a wrong kavanah, it passes the carbon. The fact that in Shchita he had a kavanah l'shma, but then in the next aveda he had a kavanah shaloi l'shma, so that passes the carbon even according to Rab Meir. So the Mishnah would not be only according to Rab Yosi. Now, Omri, it was said regarding this question here, Ahai, on which one of the two cases are we asking this question? If you look into the Mishnah, so there's two cases over here. There's one case where the person thought his kavanah was first l'shma and then shaloi l'shma, and then there's a case where first his kavanah was shaloi l'shma and then his kavanah was l'shma. So regarding which two of these cases are we asking the question? If you can say the question is being asked regarding shaloi l'shma. First he had the kavanah shaloi l'shma, and then he has the kavanah l'shma. So bein ba'aveda achas, bein b'shtei avedas, whether it's one aveda, whether it's two avedas, bein l'Rab Meir, bein l'Rab Yosi, whether it's Rab Meir, whether it's Rab Yosi. If solei mikamaisa, it should become right away possible from the first aveda, the first machshava that he had, that it's shaloi l'shma. This is even according to Rab Meir. Rab Meir says that what the person thinks in the beginning, it makes it possible. So if the first kavanah that he had was shaloi l'shma, it should be possible. And the Gemara explains, you're going to think according to Rabbi Yosi. We said before, Rabbi Yosi says, b'gemar dvarav adam nitvas. You have to look at what he said in the end. Over here, in the end, his kavanah was l'shma. So the Gemara says, the whole Rabbi Yosi nami, even according to Rabbi Yosi, af b'gemar dvarav adam nitvas. Also, you have to also look at what a person says in the end. You can't ignore what he said in the beginning, though. You look at everything that he says, or in this case, what he thinks. So, Islay, that's what he holds. So, therefore, in such a case, if a person has a kavanah shaloi l'shma, and then he has a kavanah l'shma, so for sure, l'kula alma, there's no difference if it's in the same aveda or if it's in two different avedas, it's going to be possible. In that case, we don't have any question. Hello, when is our question? Al l'shmoi v'shaloi l'shmoi. In a case where the person had a kavanah first l'shma, so he had the right kavanah in the beginning, and then afterwards shaloi l'shmoi. Then he has a kavanah shaloi l'shma. Here is our question. Is this according to Rab Meir, because we're talking about two different avedas and therefore it's going to be possible? Or is it only according to Rab Yosi? Because Rab Yosi says you have to look at the end of what he's thinking in the end, and therefore even in the same aveda it's going to be possible. So the Gemara is going to bring a few rayas to this question, starting from the Mishnah itself that we're learning over here. So Toshima, the first raya here is, let's go back to the beginning of the Mishnah. The first case of the Mishnah was HaPesach sheshachtel shalei l'shmai. The Shechita was shalei l'shma. The Kibbel, the Halach, the Zarak shalei l'shma. Or the Kabbalah, the Hailacha, the Zrika, the other from the four Avedas that were done shalei l'shma. So what did it say in the Mishnah? In all of these cases, it's possible. Hey Chidami. So how do you read this Mishnah? If you're going to read it literally, like the Mishnah says, it sounds like that he did everything shaloi l'shma. all 4 avodas were done shalei lishma. If that's the pshat, lomali ad machashev lekulu. Why is it necessary to have the kavanah shalei lishma by all 4 avodas? Become ma'isa. If salei, by the first avodah that he had the kavanah shalei lishma, it becomes pasul. Elalav hachikatani. So then it's obvious. What's the pshat in the Mishnah? Like I read it before. HaPesach shachta shalei lishma. If the shechita was done shalei lishma, inami, or the next case would be shachta lishma. The shechita was done lishma. The kibble, v'halach, v'zarak shalei lishma. And then the Kabbalah, Halacha, and Zrika were done Shalei Lishma. Inami, Shachtoi, Vikibel, Vehalach Lishmai. All 3 of those Avedis were done Lishma. Vizarak, Shalei Lishmai. Only the Zrika was done Shalei Lishma. So, what's the Halacha in these cases? It's going to be pasul. The Havya law, Shtei Avedis, because it's 2 separate Avedis. There's really 4 different Avedis over here. So even if you did 3 of them Lishma, but if one of them was done Shalei Lishma, so then it's going to pasul the Korban Pesach. So that's the beginning of the Mishnah. You could have 1 kavanah lishma for 1 aveda, but if you had a kavanah shalei lishma for a different aveda, it's going to be pasul. So now if so, Amos Seifer, what does it say in the next case of the Mishnah? Lishmai v'shalei lishmai. The person has 2 different kavanahs, 1 lishma and 1 shalei lishma. So heichi dami. What are we talking about? Going back to the question of Rav Papa. If you'll say that over here as well, we're talking about 2 different avedas, 1 aveda lishma and another aveda shalei lishma, so hainu reisha. This is identical to the reisha. It's the exact same halacha of the reisha that it's going to be pasul. So that can't be. Elalav ba'aveda achas. It must be that this case in the Mishnah, when it says that he had a kavanah lishma and shalei lishma, so it's all in the same aveda, and it's telling you that it's pasul. Rabbi Yosi, this follows the opinion of Rabbi Yosi, the Omar, af b'gmar dvarav adam nitvas, that you have to look also at what the person thought at the end, and therefore it's going to be pasul. So l'chayre, this is a clear raya that the Mishnah goes like Rabbi Yosi and not like Rabbi Meir. So the Gemara answers, no, loy, it's not necessarily a raya. There is another case here. Loylam b'shtei avedis. I can really tell you that the case in the Mishnah where it said that he had a kavanah lishma and shalei lishma, it is talking about 2 avedis. However, there's 2 different ifanim, there's 2 different ways of what this means, that you're having a kavanah lishma and shalei lishma by 2 different avedis. And the Gemara explains. Reisha, the first case in the Mishnah, the koi b'shchita, so when he's doing the shchita, v'kom achashev b'shchita. So at the time of shchita, he's having a kavanah lishma by the shchita. Or inami, koi bezrike, v'kamachasha bezrike. Then when he does the zrike, he has a kavanah by zrike. So for example, either the shchita was done lishma and the zrike was done shaloi lishma, or it could be the reverse. But in the reisha, we're talking about the standard case of 2 avedas. 1 aveda lishma and 1 aveda shaloi lishma. Seif, now the seif of the Mishnah, we're also talking about 2 avedas, but in a different kind of a way. What Gemara is going to explain over here is, in the same aveda, he had 2 kavanas. He was thinking about this aveda that he's doing right now, and he's also thinking about the next aveda that he's going to be doing soon. Let's see it inside. The koi b'shchita, he's doing the shchita. The kochashev b'zrike, and he's thinking about the zrike. And the Omar, he thinks to himself as follows: 2 different kavanas. One is Hareni Sheichet es Pesach Lishmai. The shechita of the Pesach is going to be Lishma. And then he also thinks Lizraik Damai Shalei Lishma. And the Zrike is going to be done Shalei Lishma. But when does he have that kavana about the Zrike? Not while he's doing the Zrike. He has that kavana about the Zrike while he's doing the shechita. The Kamash Melon. And what's the Mishnah teaching me? The mechashvin ma'aveda la'aveda. When you have a thought in one aveda for something that you're going to do by another aveda, it's also going to make it possible. The hainu boy that Rav Papa, this was the question that Rav Papa asks. This is not the iboy of Rav Papa over here, but this is the iboy of Rav Papa as Rashi brings in the beginning of Masechtas Vachim. Whether if you have a kavana in one aveda and you're thinking about what you're going to do at another aveda, does it affect it or not? So over here we see in our Mishnah that it will, and it will make it possible. So basically, the Gemara is saying both cases of our Mishnah are talking about a kavana on 2 avedas. The only difference is, in the first case of the Mishnah is talking about the standard case where you had a kavanah for one aveda, then a kavanah at another aveda. In the second case of the Mishnah, we could say what it's speaking about is in the one aveda he thought about this aveda and he thought about the next aveda, and that's what's making it possible. But if he had two kavanahs in the same aveda, so then you could still say that according to Rav Meir, it would be kosher. So there's no raya to Rav Papa's original question over here. Okay, the Gemara, you mind closing the door over there? So, okay, thank you. Okay, on that door. Okay. Zok the Gemara. Tashema. So looking over here in this Mishnah itself, there are two cases. So the Mishnah says one case is Oy shaloi lishmai v'lishmai. First he had the kavanah shaloi lishma. Afterwards he had the kavanah lishma. Pasal. It's going to be pasal. So heichi dami. What is this talking about when it says that he first had the kavanah shaloi lishma and then the kavanah lishma? If you're going to say it's talking about two different aveides, hashta lishmai v'shaloi lishmai. If in a case where a person has first the kavanah lishma, and afterwards, by the next aveda, he has the kavanah shaloi lishma, amrit pasal, you're going to say that it's pasal, even though he had the right kavanah first, and he had only the wrong kavanah afterwards, but it's pasal. Shaloi lishmai v'lishmai mibaya. Does it need to tell me that if he has the wrong kavanah first, in the first aveda, and then in the next kavanah he has the right kavanah, mibaya, do I have to say that it's going to be pasal? He started off with the wrong kavanah in the first aveda, so for sure it's going to be pasal. So if it's talking about two different avedas, it doesn't make sense. Elolav ba'aveda achas. Rather, what are we talking about over here? We're talking about all in one aveda. Okay, so as Rashi explains, the Mishnah is saying lishmai v'shaloi lishmai, and it's telling you that in such a case it's going to be pasal. It's teaching you a chiddush that we don't follow the opinion of Rav Meir. We look at the second kavanah that he had. That's the chiddush of that case. So since the second scenario that the Mishnah says here is talking about all in the same aveda, Reisha nami ba'aveda achas, the first case where it says first that he first had a kavanah shaloi lishmai, and then he had a kavanah lishmai, this is also all talking about one aveda. The whole Mishnah here is all talking about in the same aveda. And as Rashi explains, in the case where he had a kavanah shaloi lishmai, and then lishmai, there's also a chiddush. It's in the same aveda, and you shouldn't think that you look only at the last kavanah he had. You look also at the first kavanah that he had, which is shaloi lishmai. So basically, the Gemara is saying the only way to explain how both of these cases are a chiddush is if you say it's in the same aveda. That even though it's the same aveda, nevertheless, I say that if you had a kavanah shaloi lishma, whether first or a kavanah shaloi lishma second, either way, it's going to be pasal. That's the chiddush over here. So what do we see? That the Mishnah is talking about in the same aveda, and it says that it's pasal. Whose opinion does that follow? Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi says in the same aveda it's going to be pasal. According to Rabbi Meir, in the same aveda, if you started off with the kavanah lishma, it's going to be kosher. You had the right kavanah in the beginning. So l'chayre, this is a raya that our Mishnah goes like Rabbi Yosi. So the Gemara answers, no, la'olam b'shtei avedas. We could say the Mishnah here is talking about two different avedas. Ubedinu deloy litzrechlei. Really, the case where the person started off with the wrong kavanah, that case is no chiddush at all. If you tell me that in the case where he started with the right kavanah, it's going to be pasal, needless to say that in the case where he started off with the wrong kavanah, that it's going to be pasal. V'aidi ditani l'shmai v'shaloi l'shmai. Since it says the case where he had first the kavanah lishma and then the kavanah shaloi lishma, tani nami shaloi lishma v'lishmai. So it brings the reverse case as well, even though there's really no chiddush in that whatsoever. So it still could be talking about in two different avedas. So we don't have a raya to our question. Again, the whole question we're talking about over here is it talking about when he had these two kavanas in the same aveda, or two kavanas in two different avedas of this carbon? Another ayah, now the Gemara brings from the next Mishnah, which we're going to learn on the next daf. Over there it also talks about different kavanas that a person has, but regarding another detail. Tashema, the Mishnah there says, Shachtoi shaloi la'oichlov. When the kohen is shechting the carbon Pesach, he's thinking that it's not being shechted for anybody that's going to eat this. So there's Rashi learns in the simple pshat that no one's eating this carbon. V'shaloi lim nuyov. There's nobody he's shechting it thinking that it's going to belong to people that weren't counted on the carbon originally. By the carbon Pesach, there's a halacha olam nuyav. You have to be appointed and counted for the carbon before. So he's thinking he's shechting it for other people. Or la areilim. He's shechting it for people that are areilim. An adol doesn't have a bris. Rashi says, for example, if brothers passed away when the bris was made, so you can't make a bris for this yid, so he can't eat from the carbon Pesach. V'litmein, someone that's tamei. So if you had any of these kavanas that you're shechting it for these individuals, so then pasul. The carbon is going to be pasul. So now, what are we talking about over here? Is this a kavana in one aveda? Is this a kavana in two different avedas? Says the Gemara, hacha pshita b'aveda achas. That Mishnah is talking about a kavana in the same aveda, as Rashi says, because it's just one kavana here, and it's all one kavana in one aveda. So over there, it's talking about all in one aveda. So umid the seifa b'aveda achas, since in the seifa, in other words, in the next Mishnah, it's talking about one kavana in one aveda, reishanami b'aveda achas. So then it's logical to say that over here as well, when it says that he had the kavana l'shma and shaloi l'shma, that it's also in the same aveda. So the Gemara says no, there's no raya whatsoever from there to here. Midi area, is this a comparison? Ha-kedisa, v'ha-kedisa. Each Mishnah, each case, according to what it makes sense there. Seifa b'aveda achas. The seifa, it's talking about one kavana, so that's by one aveda. Reisha ibaveda achas ibishtei avedas. Over here, when it says that he had two kavanas, lishma and shaloi lishma, it's possible it was one aveda. It's possible it's two avedas. Our question still remains a question. Gemara has another raya. I think this is the last raya for this ibaya here. Tashama. So in the next Mishnah over there, it says lo oichlav v'shaloi lo oichlav. When you're shechting your carbon, the person's having in mind, I'm shechting it for people that could eat it, and then afterwards he thinks he's shechting it for someone, for no one, for people that no one's going to eat it. Kosher. So in that case, he had these two kavanas, it's going to be kosher. So let's understand, why over here, if he has these two different kavanas, is it going to be kosher? What are we talking about? Hey chidami. Are you going to say we're talking about two different avedas? And the time, the reason is going to be, why is it kosher? The choshev bezrike. Because the kavana that he was thinking, that no one's going to eat it, when did he have that kavana? By the zrike. And now the rule is, ein machsheves oichlin bezrike. When you have the wrong kavana regarding the fact that no one's going to eat it, if you have that kavana by zrike, it does not passel the carbon. If you look towards the bottom of the Yamud, so Rashi here, 4 lines from the bottom, brings the pasuk, Lefi achloi tochaisu. The kavana, the right kavana for who has to eat it, is only regarding tochaisu. Tochaisu means the shchita. So only by the shchita you have to have the right kavana for the people that are eating it. So therefore, if you had the kavana of who's going to eat it by the shchita, and then by the zrika you're thinking that no one's going to eat it, it doesn't matter. So therefore it's going to be kosher. Ein machshavas oichlin bezrika. That's the rule. So that would be the pshat in the Mishnah there. Now, if that's the pshat, so what could we be medayik? Ha ba'avoda achas. So if he had these two kavanas, la'oichlav and shaloi la'oichlav, all in the same avoda, kagoin b'shchita, by the shchita itself, he was thinking that it's for people that are going to eat it, and then he's thinking that no one's going to eat it. So the mahanya be'machshavas oichlin, over there, having the wrong kavanah regarding who's going to eat it is effective, pasul. In such a case, it's going to be pasul. Says the Gemara, but this can't be. Why not? Because we have another rule. Miktsas oichlin loy pasla. As long as you have in mind that anybody is going to eat it, it's not pasul. Even if you have in mind that one person is going to eat it, and then you think that afterwards that no one else is going to eat it, it doesn't matter. Miktsas oichlin is enough, because when you shech the behema, Rashi says, even if just one person is eating it, you have to shech the entire behema for that one person to eat. So having in mind that one person is going to eat it is good enough. You had another kavanah shaloi shma, doesn't matter. Or shaloi lo'ichlav, that doesn't matter. So why we can't therefore say that in such a case that if it's in the same avodah it would be pasul. So elolav. So what's the pshat in the Mishnah later when he has these two kavanas, lo'ichlav and shaloi lo'ichlav? What's the pshat there? Ba'avoda achas. It's all talking about in the same avodah. That even if you have these two kavanas in the same avodah, it's going to be kosher. As long as you thought that somebody's going to eat it, it's going to be kosher. That's the pshat in the next Mishnah. So now the Gemara says similar to what we said before. Umid the seife b'avoda achas. If that Mishnah is talking about two kavanas in the same avodah, so reishanami b'avoda achas. So in our Mishnah here, when it talks about the two kavanas, l'shma and shaloi l'shma, it's talking about two kavanas in the same avodah. So again, the Gemara answers, there's no comparison. Midi area, is this a comparison? Hakidisa and Hakidisa. Each one is according to its halacha. Seifa b'avodah achas. The next Mishnah must be talking about in the same avodah. But v'reisha, oy b'avodah achas, oy b'shtei avodas. Our Mishnah could still be talking about one avodah or two different avodas. There's no raya to this whatsoever. So the Gemara never answers, never brings a conclusive raya to this question that we're asking here. Okay, now the Gemara has another shaila. This is a very interesting question. Before we learn it inside, so Rashi here brings the halacha. If you look in Rashi, the Bramas Chol Pesach, so the halacha is, what happens if a person designates an animal for a Korban Pesach early on in the year? He has it ready a couple of months before Pesach. And now he decides he wants to bring it as a Korban, before the Korban Pesach. So if he's going to bring it as a Korban Pesach before the time, so then it's not good. It's puzzle, because it's not in the time of the Korban Pesach. But if he's going to decide to bring it as a Korban Shlomim earlier on, so he's not bringing it Lishma for the Korban Pesach, he's bringing it Shaloi Lishma for a Korban Shlomim, then the halacha is, the Korban is going to be kosher. In other words, this is a unique din. You don't find this anywhere else. If he shechts it Lishma, it's going to be puzzle, because it's not in the time of the Korban Pesach. If he shechts it Shaloi Lishma, he shechts it for the Shlomim, then it's going to be kosher. The Korban Pesach could be brought before its time for a Shlomim. So now based on this, the Gemara has the following question. The question was asked.
So it's considered the Korban Pesach?
No, Shlomim. So the question is, Pesach sheshachtoi b'shar yemois hashana, a Korban Pesach that you shechted any other time of the year, l'shmai v'shaloi l'shmai. First he had the kavanah that it's going to be a Pesach, and then afterwards he thinks it's going to be a Shlomim. Mahu, what's going to be the halacha here? So this is similar to what we had in the Mishnah, where he had two kavanas, but over here it's really in the reverse. Do I say mi asti shaloi lishmai? Do I say that when he had a kavana shaloi lishma second, which is really the right kavana in this case, umapik day lishmai, and that uproots the first kavana, which was lishma, which is not good in this case, umach shalei, and it's going to make it kosher, or maybe over here I don't say such a thing, or it will not make it kosher. Similar to what we had in our Mishnah, that if you have the two kavanas, it's going to be puzzle. So what's the halacha in this case?
Can't change it.
So we have.
It's not about Pesach.
No, but we said in the Mishnah, if you have two different kavanas, it's going to be puzzle. So over here the question is, if he has two kavanas, is it going to be when he's shechting it? When he's shechting it, he's having two kavanas. First, he has a kavana that it's going to be lishma, which is puzzling it because it's the Pesach in the wrong time. Afterwards, he has the kavana shaloi lishma, then it would be good. So the question is, the second kavana, which was the good kavana, could that kasher it or not? So ki osir Ravdimi came. So Amari said, Amrita l'shmaite kamei Rav Yirmiyah. I said this halacha as follows in front of Rav Yirmiyah. Hoyel v'lishmoi machshirei bizmanoi. In the right time, having the kavana l'shma makes it kosher. V'shaloi l'shmoi machshirei shaloi bizmanoi. When you bring the Korban Pesach shaloi bizmanoi, having the kavana shaloi l'shma also makes it kosher. So ma l'shmoi ha-machshirei bizmanoi. Just like we learned in our Mishnah regarding the kavanah of lishma, which makes it kosher in the right time, ein maitziyai midei shaloi lishmai. It cannot take it out of the wrong kavanah that you had first, which is the kavanah shaloi lishma, like we learned in our Mishnah. Af shaloi lishmai hamachshira shaloi bizmanai. The same thing also with having the correct kavanah of shaloi lishma when you bring it not in the time of the Pesach. Ein maitziyai midei lishmai. It cannot take it out of the kavanah, of the first kavanah of lishma that you had, upasul, and it's going to be pasul. So he's basically saying it's the same like our Mishnah. Just like in our Mishnah, if you have two different kavanas, it's going to be pasul. Same thing over here, if you have the two kavanas, it's going to be pasul. Even though you had, when you had the wrong kavanah first, and you have the right kavanah second, the right kavanah second cannot correct the wrong kavanah that you had first. That's what we see from our Mishnah. So this is what he said in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Va'amarli, and Rabbi Yirmiyah told me, Loi, you can't make this comparison. Why not? There's a very big difference between the wrong kavanah in our Mishnah and the wrong kavanah here. The wrong kavanah in our Mishnah is the standard halacha of shaloi lishma that applies to all karbanis. As I mentioned in the beginning, by all karbanis, if you have a kavanah shaloi lishma, it affects the status of the carbon. By most karbanis, the owner has to bring a carbon again. By a Pesach and a Chatos, the whole carbon becomes pasul. But in our Mishnah, we're talking about a kavanah shaloi lishma, which applies to all karbanis. So again, it's the Gemara. Let's look inside here. If you have the wrong kavanah, shaloi lishma, by the Pesach that's brought in its right time. Shekein noyeg b'chol hazvachim. This is a kind of wrong machshava that's relevant by all karbanas. That's a very strong bad kavana, because we find this psul, this issue, by all karbanas. Toimar b'lishmai. However, over here, regarding a carbon Pesach that's brought in the wrong time, where lishma is going to passel it, this kind of a psul, this is a kind of a psul that you don't find anywhere else. It's unique over here for the carbon Pesach. So maybe this is not such a strong kind of a psul. You don't find it anywhere else. So if it's not just a strong kind of a psul, maybe correcting that kavana afterwards and having the right kavana could be machsharet. So you can't compare these two things. So this is not so. From our Mishnah, we can't bring a raya. My Allah, what's the answer to this question? So Amar Rave explains, Pesach sheshachtoi b'shar yemais hashana, a carbon Pesach that you shecht not on the right time, any other day of the year. L'shmoi, first you had the kavana l'shma, which is the wrong kavana, and then v'shaloi l'shmoi, then you had the right kavana, kosher. Rave said it's going to be kosher. And what's the svara? So Rave gives the following svara: Daha stamoi l'shmoi kai. When you bring this carbon Pesach, if you had no kavana, you're just bringing it stam. So stam, it's made to be lishma. This is the rule, but we get to kachim. Stam is lishma, if you don't have any kavana. So it's made for the carbon Pesach. And nevertheless, what's the halacha? Ki shachit lei shaloi lishmai, kosher. When you go ahead and you shech this carbon Pesach any other day of the year, and you're doing it for a shlomim, you're doing it shaloi lishma, it becomes kosher. So what do I see from this? Alma, asi shaloi lishma, umapik lei midei lishmai. So the kavana that you had now, that it should be for a shlamim, uproots its status and the stam, which is that it should be lishma. So you have a koyach with your kavana shaloi lishmai to uproot the stam of it being lishma. So if so, kishachet nami lishmai. Shaloi lishmai, if you first had the kavana lishma, and then you correct that, and you have the kavana shaloi lishma, asi shaloi lishmai, your second kavana of shaloi lishma, which is the right kavana, humapik leimidei lishmai, it could also uproot from the lishma. Just like any time your kavana shaloi lishma uproots from the status that it had, which is for the carbon Pesach, even if you mamish had a kavana lishma, if you correct it and have a kavana shaloi lishma, it should also be able to correct it. That's Rava's comparison. So the Gemara says, no, you can't compare this. The Gemara asks a question on this. That so he asked Rava as follows: how do you know it's the same thing? Maybe to uproot the status of the carbon Pesach in a case where he had no original kavanah, it was just a stam. Maybe that's different than a case where he clearly had the wrong kavanah, where he was clearly thinking that I'm bringing it for the carbon Pesach. Maybe that's different. And he brings you a eye to this. Going back to the Mishnah that we quoted before, a person thought the kavanah first that it's for the people that are going to eat it, and then he's thinking afterwards that nobody's going to eat it. So the Mishnah said kosher. It's going to be kosher. Okay, in such a case, it's going to be kosher. Now, and then what's the halacha? There's another halacha. If he's only having in mind, I'm shechting it for people that nobody's going to eat it, so then pasul. So then it's going to be pasul. Now, why is it pasul? Why would it be pasul in such a case? Every carbon Pesach, there's a stam. What's the status of every carbon Pesach stam? It's made for people to eat it. Right? And nevertheless, what do we say over here? That the carbon Pesach is stam for people to eat it, and when you have a kavanah shaloi la'oichlav, it uproots that stam, and it makes it pasul. But if you befeidish had a kavanah la'oichlav for people that are going to eat it, now when you have a kavanah that people are not going to eat it, it does not uproot that. It's going to be kosher. So what do we see from here? There's a very big difference between uprooting something that you clearly had a kavanah about and something which is just a stam. A stam is not as strong. So we can't compare these two. So hachanami over here as well. It's a big difference if a person had a kavanah that he's bringing it for the carbon Pesach, and now you want to uproot that from a case where he had no kavanah at all and it's just a stam. That's the Gemara's question. So the raya that Ravada Barava brought to Rava when he asked this question was from the case of Loichlav and Shaloi Loichlav. So on that, the Gemara says, Amalei, Midi Irya, Could you compare it to that case? So the Gemara is now going to explain there's two levels of stama. The stama of a carbon Pesach, that it's designated for a Pesach, is a much stronger stama than the stama that it's designated for people to eat. And the reason is, the stama that is designated for a carbon Pesach cannot be removed. That's rock solid. No one's removing that. The stama that it's made for the people to eat, these people that are designated to eat it, until the actual shechita, till the moment of the actual shechita, they could remove themselves. They could exchange themselves to a different carbon. So that kind of a stama is not a very strong stama at all. So the midi area, is there a comparison over here? When we're talking about the stama for people that are going to eat it, okay, so again, Bishleim Hassam is going on the case where it's the stam of carbon Pesach. Bishleim, the stam of carbon Pesach, until you had the wrong kavana, or in this case it's actually the right kavana, that you're shechting it for the shlomim. So this carbon is designated stam for a Pesach, and nobody's changing that. So you're now having a kavana to uproot a very strong stam that nobody could change. It's definitely designated for the carbon Pesach. You're bringing me a raya from the stam that it is by la'oichlov, that it's designated stam for these people to eat it. Koi, that's what it's there for. But it's not such a strong stam at all. Dilme mimshechi hani, maybe these people will pull away from this carbon. Maybe other people are going to come and join this carbon. The Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, it's later here in the Masechta, Nimnin u'mayshchen es yideim imenu achi yishachid. You can uproot yourself, you can go away from one carbon Pesach and join a different carbon Pesach until the actual shechita itself. So therefore, in that case, your kavanah that's uprooting the stam is no big deal, because it's not a stam which is a very solid stam. So you can't compare these two things. So therefore, the raya that Rav said before remains. If I could uproot a stam, which is a rock solid stam, because it's not going anywhere, so too, if I first had a kavanah for the Pesach, and then afterwards I had a kavanah for the shlomim, which all year round, that's the right kavanah, it could uproot the first kavanah of the Pesach, and the carbon is going to be kosher. Okay, stop over there.